Me and my younger sister, we were in Holland. They put us in Rotterdam on the train, and we went to Paris because the ship stopped in Cherbourg. So we were going over Paris. Somebody from the Jewish committee picked us up. And I remember the rolls and and it was, we slept over there. Somebody else picked us up and went from Paris to Cherbourg, where the St. Louis stopped for the new passengers. I still remember I was 13 that time. And I got on the ship, and my mother saw I was full with lice. She thought, well, we looked terrible. We weren't well taken care of. So on the ship, the famous St. Louis, my father was in Cuba already, expecting us. But somehow when we pulled in and they were screaming, "Mañana, mañana," so we'll get off then tomorrow. That's another story of my life. My father came around with a little boat to say hello to us. He sent packages up. The food was beautiful. They treated us well, but there was a big propaganda for the German people. Nobody wants the Jews. They formed a committee, and they tried Roosevelt, they tried all the other countries, but nobody wanted us. We were 1,000 people on that ship. It was a pleasure boat. You know, we got good food, well taken care, beautiful rooms, and it was exciting to me. And I remember how hot it was. I remember that. And my father came with a little boat around. "Inge, let me see how tall you got." You know how parents are. So it was, and then after being there for 8 days, some people got off. I don't know, it was a money sanction or whatever it was. Maybe very few people got off. And we had to leave. My mother had her hat on. She was all dressed up. But she said, "I'm not going to go upstairs to see that boat pulling out." So we ended 8 days on that ship. They sent telegrams to Roosevelt. Nobody wanted us.
Well, anyhow, we got on the St. Louis, and going there was fine. You know, we had it was a German ship, but it was not like on the Nazi. There were about 1,000 people on the ship, and most of them were Jews. There were a few non-Jews, a few other passengers, but most of them were refugees. But the crew was very respectful and very, very nice. There was no anti-Semitism or anything. And like I said, I was 16. I had my first boyfriend, and I was very busy with all kinds of activities, and it was fine. Till we got to Havana.
How long did this journey take?
It took 10 days at the time, I think, 2 weeks or 10 days. And when we got into Havana, the police, the immigration officers came on board, and they set themselves up in the dining room, and we all filed in and showed our visas and our passports, and my parents went down to the cabin, and we packed, and everything seemed to be going all right. So then that night they said, "Well, there's a slight delay. I think you're going to stay overnight on board ship yet." And it was hot and humid, and we, you know, we weren't used to it. We stayed most of this night up on board, on deck, and we weren't right in the harbor. We were a little bit out, you know, and so every day was something else. We stayed more or less a week, as I remember, in Havana. And people were, of course, very desperate because a lot of families were already separated, where the husband has already been there and the wives were on the ship with children. And so there were little boats coming from Havana and surrounding the St. Louis, and they were screaming, you know, how's this and how's that, and they, to each other, and they, a couple of men jumped and into the ocean, and I mean, it was a very bad situation. And they sent telegrams to President Roosevelt and to the Congress here and to the Jewish community.
Who's they? Who's they?
Well, I think they quickly formed a committee. How Jews, 1,000 Jews on the ship are going to form a committee. So they had lawyers on board and you know, smart. And they sent telegrams, and the Jewish agency here, the Jewish Appeal or whatever it was at that time, got very involved. And they came, the two people came down, flew down from America and had some negotiations with the Cuban president, and he wanted another $500 per head to let us down. And that was a lot of money at that time. But I understand they had rallies here, and they had benefits with Charlie Chaplin and all kinds of things to raise the money. But they said, no, they're not going to pay $500 a head. They thought they were smart. So after about a week, he said, you know what, take your Jews out of here and put them wherever you can. And we won't let them in under any circumstances.